Hi there, this is Amy Palmer of Daisy and Clover Designs, and today I'm going to be demonstrating the German short row technique. So the first question is, what's a short row? A short row is when you work partway across your row and turn around and come back. And so without ever completing the whole row. So I'm going to go ahead and start knitting to get myself over there as I talk. And so when would we use a short row technique? We would use it when we wanted shaping, where we wanted more length in one area of our knitting than in another. Examples that I can think of include heel cups, where we want the center of our heel to be longer than the edges of our heel so that we don't end up with a tube sock. Or a sleeve cap, where the middle of the shoulder needs to be a little longer than the edges of the shoulder. And finally, bust darts. So when we're dealing with sleeve caps and heel cups, we normally get instructions from a pattern. But when we're talking about bust starts, that's personal and we have to figure it out on our own. So I'm going to say there are techniques, but mostly know that we don't want to create something that's too abrupt and we don't want to create something that's anywhere but on the side of the bust. So to do that, I'm going to knit to within a few stitches of the edge or the side, depending on whether I'm knitting in the round or knitting flat. In this case, I'm pretending like I'm knitting flat. So I've come to within 3 stitches of the edge. I'm ready to turn around and go back so that I build up more rows here in the center than I do out on the edges. So to do that, I'm going to turn my work at this point. But if I did nothing, I would leave a hole everywhere I turned. So the German short row technique is that I have my yarn in front, very important, yarn in front regardless of where it finished. And I slip that first stitch from my left needle to my right needle. And now I do something that we as knitters have trained ourselves never ever to do. And that is I'm going to take my yarn, I'm going to pull tight, and I'm going to pull it up and over my right needle. And I'm going to zoom in for just a second here once I get a few stitches to anchor this. Actually, I'll go ahead and zoom in now. That's what it looks like. It looks like 2 stitches all of a sudden. That's both legs of the stitch below. And that's the magic to making this happen, is that we've actually pulled the stitch below up onto our needle. All right, to work back, all I have to do now that I've done that is just bring my yarn to the front and start purling back because I'm working on stockinette. If I were working on garter, I could also use this technique and I would just start knitting back. So what I just did is frequently referred to as make double stitch or make duplicate stitch. You'll see it noted sometimes MDS in your patterns. And right now I'm just going to work back and show you that on the purl side, once I make that stitch, it's going to look a little bit different, although I'm going to use the exact same procedure. So I'm going to purl to within 3 stitches, and the exact number depends on either your pattern or the size yarn you're using. With bust starts, I'll say no closer than about a 1/2 inch between double stitches or they get too abrupt. All right, I'm back to where I wanted to be. First step, turn work. Okay, the work is turned. Now I need my yarn in front, so I have to bring it to the front this time because I was purling and I turned my work. Now I'm ready to slip my stitch from my left needle to my right needle. And then here's that double stitch thing where we bring our yarn up and over our right needle, kind of like we were making too small of a yarn over. And then I'm ready to work back, but I want to show you, I'll work these first couple of stitches just to hold it in place. I want to show you how the stitch on the purl side looks really twisted compared to what it looked like on the other side. That's expected, and all of those stitches are going to get resolved. Right now you're thinking, but Amy, I'm going to have increased my stitch count. What am I going to do? Well, the actual resolving technique for this fixes it so that we are back down to our original stitch count. So I'm just going to work across and re-demo one more time. Those make double stitches. Let's see, I'm 1, 2. So the instructions will usually say, stop so many stitches before the double stitch. I see my double stitch, and let's just say it says stop 4 stitches before my double stitch. I'm 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches before my double stitch. Okay, time to turn. Turn my work. Make double stitch. My yarn is in front because I've turned over work that I was knitting. I'm going to slip the very first stitch from my left needle to my right needle, and I'm going to pull my yarn up and over my right needle. There's my double stitch. Bring my yarn to the front so that I can purl back. Let's purl back and make one more on the purl side, and then I'll show you what we do to keep from increasing our stitch count and to close up those holes. Note that my distance between stitches as I work my way in is getting shorter and shorter. One more stitch. Let's see if that isn't 4. So I see my double stitch right there, looking kind of weird. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm 4 stitches before. Let's turn and work back. So if I turn my work over, once again, if I just take off, I'm going to leave a hole right where I turned. So instead, I'm going to bring my yarn to the front, very important, yarn to the front with German short rows, slip the first stitch on my left needle to my right needle, and pull the yarn up and over, creating that really weird twisted double stitch. Now I'm ready to work my way across. So once I get over there, I'm going to resolve this as I work my way all the way across by knitting the legs of the stitches together. So I've got a double stitch right there. How am I going to resolve this? I'm going to zoom in so that you can see it a little better. I'm going to put my needle tip through both legs, wrap around as if to knit, and pull through, just like a normal knit, but it feels more like a knit 2 together because I'm knitting both legs together. And now I'll continue on to my next double stitch so that you can see me resolve that one more time. Let's see. You can even see that I've got part of one row and part of another because it's 2 different colors. I'm going to knit both legs of that stitch together, kind of like a knit 2 together. So I have not increased my stitch count on this end, and I can work all the way, either to the end or I can continue on in the round. All right, now I'm ready to turn over and work my way back. Because I'm at a selvage edge, I'm not going to make a double stitch here. That's just the end of a row. There's no hole to be left there. So I'm purling back. If I were knitting in the round, I would have continued on along and resolved the stitches on the other end from the other direction, just in turn as I come to them in knitting in the round. The procedure for resolving those stitches would be the exact same. We would just work 2 legs of a stitch together. In that case, it would be a knit 2 together because you were coming around if you were in stockinette, but it would be whatever technique is appropriate for the stitch pattern that you're using. Right now, I'm purling, and so when I get to those 2 legs of a duplicate stitch, I'm going to purl them together. All right, I'm almost there. One more stitch. Now I'm sitting here at this weird looking duplicate stitch. All I'm going to do is purl both legs of that stitch together before continuing on. I've come to my next one. I'm just going to purl both legs of this stitch together. And now I can finish out my row. No stitch count increase, extra rows in the middle, no holes. Let's take a look at this and see what we have. I'll push this onto the cable so that we can look at it. And there we have it. We have extra rows in the middle, nope, not so many rows on the edges, so that I've created an ideal bust start of a heel cup, or start of a sleeve cap.